Hello and welcome back to this week's iteration of Shakespeare and Film. Once again, this is your intrepid Professor Joanne Diaz, and I'm pleased to report that this week my sponsor is Homeschool Hamlet. Anyway, my husband told me I should have a sponsor, so that's my sponsor for this week. Let me do a little bit of housekeeping for this week's lesson so you know what to expect. First, I want to give you a sense of the homework that I'm expecting you to do this week. I would like you to watch Asta Nielsen's silent film version of Hamlet. It is free and available on YouTube. I have provided the internet link on our Moodle site, on our new syllabus. It's about 2 hours long. I am aware that this was not the original version we were going to watch. Originally, we were going to look at Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. I regret that we are not going to watch that. However, it is not available for free online, and also it is 4 hours long. And I am aware that with all that is happening in our world right now, it might be difficult for you to commit to a 4-hour film and be able to reflect on it in a meaningful way. So we're shifting things a little bit, continuing with our interest in German Expressionism, and we're going to be looking at a silent film version of Hamlet, and we will discuss that during our time together today. Okay, I also need you to read Maurice Hindel's book chapter on silent film Shakespeare, which is wonderful. In general, I love his book. If you all are not aware of this book, I hope that if you're interested in the topic of Shakespeare and film, that you will get a copy. Maurice Hindel has a wonderful, accessible writing style. He's able to convey quite a lot in these brief chapters, and his chapter on silent Shakespeare will intrigue you. After you've read Hindel's book chapter and you have watched Asta Nielsen's Silent Hamlet, I would like you to post your online response by midnight on April 5th, if not before. The sooner you can do it, the more it helps me, because it'll help me put my lesson together in advance. The key to success with our Moodle responses is close reading. So I would love for you to look at just one scene from Asta Nielsen's silent film version and analyze its elements. And I'm going to give you some tools with which you can do that in this lesson. All right? So what I'd like us to do today is once again start with a writing exercise. So you will need a pen and a notebook. I don't want you to do this online. I want you to write it out longhand. Then we will talk about your responses to Laurence Olivier's Hamlet, and then segue into an introduction on Asta Nielsen's Hamlet. So this writing exercise that we will do today takes about 5 minutes. And so I want to guide you to that exercise. And to do that, I will go to the World Wide Web. Meg Miner, who is the archivist at Illinois Wesleyan University, is one of my favorite all-time people. She is so enthusiastic and so eager to share the rich resources of the IWU archives with everyone. And I was watching her on social media, and she shared a link to this new opportunity that is on the IWU Archives and Special Collections blog. Basically, she wants us to share our thoughts and experiences with the future. If you haven't been to the IWU Tate archives, maybe you're not aware that Meg Miner has cataloged some wonderful archival materials from World War I, World War II, letters between college students, scrapbooks from various time periods, and she wants us to be really keeping a finger on our pulse during this really extraordinary time. So look what she says here. Share your thoughts and experiences with the future. Illinois Wesleyan University's archives is creating a digital record of IWU community members' experiences during the COVID-19 pandemic, beginning with the first campus communication on February 3rd. You are invited to share your reflections on this global public health emergency. And then she offers some possible questions that you could ask yourself. What are you doing during your time away from campus? How are you staying connected with people you care about? Where are you getting information from about IWU, your extended community, and the larger world? How is distance learning affecting your perspectives on your classes? How is telecommuting affecting the way you view your work? Anything else you'd care to share? What I love about those questions is she's saying you can answer them any way you like. You can answer them in the shape of a text message, an audio recording, a short video, photographic images of physical art that you create, or copies of digital art or performances. So it's wide open, really. You could do anything you like to share your insights and experiences with the IWU Tate archives. And I love this idea, and I would like for us to try an activity that will perhaps be one of these things that you could submit. So this week's writing exercise will take about 3 minutes. And I've borrowed from Meg Miner's language here. Basically, I want you to write down in longhand, just for 3 minutes, just one answer to one of the questions that Meg Miner posed. How are you staying connected with people you care about? Be as specific as possible. What do they sound like or look like when you are communicating with them? Are you using a phone to talk with a grandparent? A phone to use video conference technology? Which video technology are you using? Which platform? How does it feel? And if you're struggling to stay connected, I'd like you to make a list of 3 people you should contact and how you plan on contacting them. So I'm going to set my timer, and we are going to do this writing exercise for the next 3 minutes. Go. And I'll do this exercise with you. Okay, stop wherever you are. I hope that was useful to you. I tried to be as detailed as I could, and I realized in doing so that it took me a while to write down just 3 different kinds of interactions I've been having over the past week. When I call my father, who is 85 years old, his primary means of communication is a landline telephone. He doesn't really use a cell phone, doesn't use video conferencing technology at all, doesn't have a smartphone. So I need to call him when he's available at home, and I often use speakerphone so that he can hear me well and I can hear him well. He's a bit hearing impaired. I'm finding that my hearing is not getting better. It's getting worse, and so we sometimes often speak on speakerphone together. So that was interesting for me to think about how my communication with him, he's really one of the people I call the most frequently. I don't call that many people that often, but he's the one I call. So I hope that was useful to you, and if you found that you want to continue writing, I hope that you'll do that and submit whatever results you have to Meg Miner, and we'll see what she does with them. It'll be an interesting archival opportunity. Okay, so let's move on, if we could, to talk about your Moodle responses to Laurence Olivier's Hamlet. Thank you for. No, actually, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to go back here and I'm going to go to. Bear with me. I want to look at a couple of key scenes that a lot of you seem to be drawn to. So, for example, Erin, you were one of several people who was really drawn to the psychological aspects of Laurence Olivier's film. Last week in my video to you, we talked about the basic elements of German Expressionism and film noir, and I suggested to you that Laurence Olivier was very deliberately using some of those film noir techniques because he wanted to turn Hamlet into a more contemporary feeling thriller, a more psychological thriller, something that was more accessible and more exciting, right? And I think for the most part, he succeeded in doing that. I really liked what you were saying, Erin, in your Moodle response about how the film noir elements of Olivier's film amp up the uncertain and anxious atmosphere. They create a psychological aspect. You get a real sense of the emotional and physical toll that an encounter with the paranormal might make on an individual. So in the scene that Erin chose to focus on, and several of you in your Moodle responses focused on this scene, this is a spot where young Hamlet, Prince Hamlet, is seeing his father, King Hamlet's ghost, for the first time. And notice the throbbing heartbeat effect of that Olivier is creating in the film. Notice that chiaroscuro, that stark contrast between light and dark that I described last week. And then notice the elements that are in the scene, the mise en scène, particularly the use of fog, right? And I really liked what Erin said about that fog. She wrote, "It's hard to make out anything in the real world around him. He's trapped in this airy mystery, this fog where he finds himself stuck for the remainder of the film." I think that's true. So if we could, let's just watch one brief moment where all of these elements are coming together to really foreground how this is a personal catastrophe story for Prince Hamlet. Yeah? Watch this.
Defect. Their virtues else be they as pure as grace, shall in the general censure take corruption from that particular fault. Angels and ministers of grace to him. Look, my lord, it comes! spirit of health, or goblin damned, thou comest in such a questionable shape that I will speak to thee. I'll call thee Hamlet. King, Father, Royal Dane, oh, answer me!
I'm going to stop there on that final shot, which I like very much. And so, if I could, this is Hamlet's father who's appearing as a ghost. A nice effect of the film is that Laurence Olivier actually created a filter on his voice so that his voice is actually King Hamlet's ghost voice in this passage. Talk about psychological. So Olivier, as Prince Hamlet, is speaking to King Hamlet, but King Hamlet's ghost is using Prince Hamlet's filtered voice. It's a nice film effect. So again, the use of black and white, of fog, of shadows, it's really creating that noir mystique. Very intriguing. I'd like to jump for a moment to the to be or not to be speech, which a lot of you focused in on really quite nicely. I'm going to start here. And this, keep in mind, this is a little sleight of hand. There's a lot of moments where Olivier excises huge passages from this play. As I said, this play is supposed to be almost 4 hours long. The version you saw is much shorter, considerably. And another thing he does is rearrange scenes. So the to be or not to be speech is supposed to precede his encounter with Ophelia, where Ophelia returns his love letters to her in that staged moment of surveillance where Claudius and Polonius are watching them have their encounter. In Laurence Olivier's version, he first has Laurence Olivier cuss out Ophelia, leave her alone, weeping on the steps, and then he rushes up the stairs, very film noir, sort of this maze of stairs spiraling up in this sort of psychic disillusionment moment. He makes it to the top of the castle, and all of a sudden he's looking over the ocean. And I just want you to watch some of what's happening. I think it was Eric, Cassandra, Mike, and others of you as well. You are observing that we go, there's a nice sort of juxtaposition between that look down at the ocean, and there's a fogginess in the camera following the stairs up to where Hamlet is. There's a lot of use of high angles and zooms, and we go from the back, seeing the back of Laurence Olivier's head, and then there's some sort of foggy, impressionistic work there, and then you see what he's seeing. It's a really nice effect. So the camera goes from outside Hamlet's head into Hamlet's head to see what he sees as he starts to contemplate suicide and articulate his to be or not to be speech. A lot of you also observed that the use of voiceover is very psychological because it's hard to tell where his voiceover begins, where his actual speech ends. Of course, in a theatrical space, it would be a monologue, right? All entirely spoken to the audience. Film, though, provides Laurence Olivier with the opportunity to play with voiceover, which feels more interior, more private, more solitary, as well as sharing the actual spoken words, yeah? So let's see how he does that. I'm going to watch this for a few minutes.
be or not to be? That is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them, to die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep, to sleep. Perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delays, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would fardels bear, to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have, than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience doth make cowards of us all. And thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought. And enterprises of great pith and moment, with this regard their currents turn awry, and lose the name of action.
I'll stop there. I could just keep going. You know, it's fantastic. He's amazing. Oh, Larry. Anyway, magnificent scene in which so many things are happening. It's important to keep in mind he's reversed those scenes where now he's been dejected and rejected by Ophelia. He's cursed her out. He's abandoned her on the steps, so that his feelings of dejection, this one character with whom he had some connection in the play, now he has no connection with her. And so he's feeling dejection not just over the grief that he's feeling at his father's death, not only the feelings that he has of rage that his father has been murdered and he must avenge his father's death, but now love melancholy as well. And by reversing the order of these interactions, it's very intriguing. You really get a sense of his despair and paralysis, which of course we know that is one of Olivier's primary concerns in this version of Hamlet that he's creating. There are so many other absolutely magnificent scenes that we could discuss, and you are discussing them on Moodle, so I'm delighted to see that. But in the time that we have left, I think I want to just shift quickly now to talk about Asta Nielsen's version of Hamlet. This is a version that I don't think a lot of people know much about. And that is why I want to share it with you, because it is one of my all-time favorite movies, and certainly one of my favorite versions of Hamlet. So let me tell you a little bit about Asta Nielsen and provide a little bit of setup for what you're going to see this week, which is a very, very entertaining film. And if you're hearing this and you're thinking, oh, Jesus, now I gotta watch another black and white movie, Diaz, don't you know that Generation Z does not like black and white movies? Yeah, I know. Don't worry about it. It's a film appreciation class. You know what I'm saying? So it's something new. It's something strange. You'll try it. You'll see what you think. It'll be great. Keep an open mind. You know what I mean? You'll be all right. Okay, so who was Asta Nielsen? Why bother? Why pay attention to her? She was born in 1881 and she died in 1972. She had a long life that spanned the birth of film up through talkies and way into, all kinds of different acting styles and technologies. It's an extraordinary life. It's difficult for us to imagine now, because frankly, most of us have never heard of her, let alone seen her, just how famous she was, how rich she was, and how powerful she was. Very, very interesting person. She was a Danish film star. She founded her own film studio in Berlin during the 1920s, which made her a lot of money. But up until that moment, there was no film star that was more famous than Asta Nielsen. One of the reasons we don't know a lot about her in the United States is because a lot of her films were so saucy that she was censored in the United States, actually. And I am a tenured professor, but even I am not going to show you a famous shot from one of her films of her doing the gaucho dance. I will let you Google that just so that you can get a sense of why she might have been censored in the United States. She was known for her very sensual, erotic performance style. She was a magnificent actor who appeared in all kinds of films, really extraordinary. But and we don't know, she only performed in one film that had sound. All of her films, she made 70 silent films, so she was a very prolific actress and producer. But once the silent film era ended, so too did her film career. In 1921, she decided that she was at the height of her powers and she wanted to play Shakespeare's greatest tragic figure, Hamlet. But she was a woman, so she decided to tweak the story of Hamlet a little bit. And so she decided that the reason Hamlet is this tragic figure who cannot make up his mind is because he's a woman cross-dressing as a man. Okay, so now things are getting really saucy. So Hamlet in this play she's a woman cross-dressing as a man. She deceives the whole kingdom. She's in love with her best friend Horatio, who has no idea until the moment she dies that she's a woman. Unbelievable. We'll get to that in a little while. But first, how and why should we engage with silent Shakespeare? It seems like a ridiculous notion. What would a silent film version of Shakespeare even mean if it's his language that we admire so much? What happens to Shakespeare when we don't have his language, when we can't hear his language? When you read Maurice Hendel's book chapter this week, you'll see that he offers several answers to that question. And here's a few of them. First of all, we know that Shakespeare intersects with film in its earliest days in the late 1800s, early 1900s. We know that at least 500 silent Shakespeare films were made before 1929. So there was definitely a demand for Shakespeare and film during the silent era. But how could that be the case? As we've discussed in class, one reason is because filmmakers wanted to turn the film medium into something that was not just lowbrow, but was also capable of being highbrow. They also wanted to capture for documentary purposes, some of the greatest stage actors of the late 18 and early 1900s. And so they wanted to capture these performances. And the reason that's so valuable to us as historians of film and literature is that means that we get to see what acting looked like 100 years ago, which is so thrilling. It's before the method school of acting and more naturalistic styles of acting. And it's a lot of fun to see how much people were able to do with their hands, bodies, and voices before they had sound in film. So let's talk about a few things that this film has that might interest or surprise you. First of all, it has color. So if you follow the link that I sent you on the syllabus that's on Moodle, and you follow this, it has hand-tinted frames. So these were done by hand. It's extraordinary. You'll see that occasionally the film is yellowish or turquoise or sort of a sepia-toned, maroonish color. And I like that. It creates a nice mood or tone that might interest you. And it was very, very common for people to hand tint each frame in the celluloid of the film. Okay, so what else do we have? You will also be aware of the fact that there is language in this film. So even if you can't hear it, you have title cards, right? And I'm just going to point here. You're going to see that the title cards are in the original German because this is a German film. And you're going to see here that this version, which is for English audiences, has the English translation of the German title cards from the original film. Okay, that's kind of interesting. So we also can look for performance styles. And I'd like to say a little bit about performance. Sarah Bernhardt who was one of the great actresses of the late 1800s. She had a sort of formula for the Victorian acting style that she was so famous for. And it had three parts. It had the glance, it had the gesture, and it had the word. So that was the case in the late 1800s on the stage. If you were going to see Sarah Bernhardt perform her version of Hamlet, you would have seen her first have a glance that resulted in a facial expression. And then you would see her have a gesture, something that she does with her body, and then that would motivate her speech. And so you see Asta Nielsen engaging with this melodramatic acting style. She has these giant dark eyes and this pale skin, and it's so much fun to watch her face. There's so much that she's capable of doing just with her face, but also with her very lean, pretty androgynous body. And I would love for you to pay attention to that as you're watching this film. This is a quote from scholar Monica Seidel. She has a very nice article about Asta Nielsen's Hamlet. And I think it's worth noting. I'm just going to read this quote to you. We may ask, what is left of Shakespeare's Hamlet in a silent film? Not much when it comes to the actual lines of the play. Instead, Shakespeare becomes a complex reference point that is of use in articulating social and cultural identities. That's very interesting, and we're going to hang on to that quote because that's going to become useful in just a couple minutes when we talk about the relationship between Horatio and Hamlet. You're going to be able to use vocabulary that we've used before in this class. There are plenty of close-ups of Asta Nielsen in this film. She's so stunningly beautiful and expressive, and the camera just loves to see what she's doing with her face, but there's plenty of close-up reaction shots that you'll want to be paying attention to as you watch this film. Plenty of medium shots. If you recall, medium shots are typically of the torso and head. That's what we call a medium shot in film. So this is a film that's using medium shots to good effect, and long shots as well. Long shots meaning that that's the full body or full set of elements in the frame, but usually in the distance All three of those kinds of shots are readily available in this film. Again, you're going to be able to use vocabulary that you've used before. We talked about German Expressionism last week. You're going to see a lot of attention to shadows, to angles. It's very important. Excuse me. You're going to see all kinds of uses of light. Of course, plenty of work with shadows and contrast, but you're going to see the limits of light in early silent film. And I kind of love this. A lot of my favorite silent films are actually filmed outdoors because natural lighting was the best light that filmmakers could get. They didn't have the kind of advanced lighting technology that we had in later decades. So if they had to create a complex scene in a film and they didn't have the lighting they needed indoors, they would create it outdoors. So you will notice that in Asta Nielsen's Hamlet, the play within a play is taking place outdoors, and that was quite common in the films of in the early couple decades of the 20th century. So what else can we say? We keep talking about silent film. By the way, this isn't a silent film. Almost every silent film had some kind of musical effects. The musical effects in this film are created by a contemporary composer, Michael Riesler. He's a German composer and performer, and he created the sound that you're going to hear in this film, which is really, really good. I haven't found a way to contact Michael Riesler yet, but I am totally going to find a way because I just want to send him some fan mail. I think he's great. Is very, very interesting, a lot of fun to watch. Anyway, so make sure you're listening to the sound effects, the melodramatic effects that his music creates. So let's get into looking at, what do my notes tell me? Yeah, I want us to, and this is just one film still that's showing us a title card in German, and the English translation is, "Only you, Horatio, will know that I hide behind a mask." And this is Asta Nielsen, obviously a woman cross-dressing as a man, saying this in a scene with Horatio. And I thought that I just wanted to capture that image and share it with you because I want you to think about the nature of the relationship between Horatio and Hamlet. And to do so, perhaps it would be useful to read a little bit of Shakespeare's play. To do that, I'll go to the digital edition of the Folger edition of the Hamlet. This is a really nice scene in, bear with me, Act 3, Scene 2. That's what I thought. Right. So this is Act 3, Scene 2. This is the scene where Hamlet is giving tips to the players so that they know exactly how to perform the scenes he's asking them to perform. They leave the scene. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern leave the scene. And then Hamlet is by himself. And who comes on stage but Horatio? And as you know, Horatio is his most faithful, trustworthy friend. And this is a really nice scene where we get to see how Hamlet feels about that. Horatio enters the scene, and Horatio says, "Here, sweet lord, at your service." And Hamlet says, "Horatio, thou art e'en as just a man as e'er my conversation cope withal. You're just about the most just, honorable person I've ever met, yeah?" And Horatio says, "Oh, my dear lord." And Hamlet says, "Nay, do not think I flatter. For what advancement may I hope from thee, that no revenue hast but thy good spirits to feed and clothe thee?" Basically, he's saying, don't think I'm flattering you. It's not like I can get anything out of you. I'm the royalty here. You're just my friend. You know, you are not in a position of power. I'm not trying to flatter you. I'm telling you genuinely how I feel about you. Why should the poor be flattered? No. Let the candied tongue lick absurd pomp and crook the pregnant hinges of the knee where thrift may follow fawning. Dost thou hear? Since my dear soul was mistress of her choice and could of men distinguish, her election had sealed thee for herself. For thou hast been as one in suffering all that suffers nothing, a man that fortune's buffets and rewards has ta'en with equal thanks. And blessed are those whose blood and judgment are so well commeddled that they are not a pipe for fortune's finger to sound what stop she pleases. Give me that man that is not passion's slave, and I will wear him in my heart's core, aye, in my heart of heart, as I do thee. Something too much of this. There is a play tonight before the king, etc., etc. This is a really interesting passage. It's very brief. We don't get a lot of encounters like this between Horatio and Hamlet, but there's a lot in here that we could spend time on. But very briefly, he's basically saying, do you hear what I'm saying? Since my dear soul was mistress of her choice, and could of men distinguish, her election hath sealed thee for herself. First of all, his soul is gendered as a woman. Since my dear soul was mistress of her choice, and could of men distinguish, her election hath sealed thee for herself. You're the one my soul has chosen, for thou hast been as one in suffering all that suffers nothing. You are not a slave to your passions. You, Horatio, have excellent judgment. I respect you. I admire you, right? Give me that man that is not passion's slave, and I will wear him in my heart's core, aye, in my heart of heart, inside my heart of hearts, as I do thee. And then that phrase, this really interests me, something too much of this. It's as if he might be saying, no, wait a minute, I just said too much. I told you too much about how I feel. Oh my God, what just happened? That was so hot. I love that. In my understanding of this passage, it's really helped me to look at Jeffrey Maston's scholarship from a book called Textual Intercourse that he published in 1997. Look at what he has to say on Horatio, Hamlet, and homosocial friendship. Notice I didn't say homosexual friendship, although that might be what's happening. At the very least, this is a very powerful homosocial friendship. Keep in mind that there were many homosocial institutions in Renaissance England: the church, the military, universities, and Hamlet knows Horatio from their university days in Wittenberg. So their friendship is incredibly close, and there's some context that Shakespeare would have been drawing upon in order to understand and develop their friendship on the page and on the stage. So here's a quote from Jeffrey Maston. Friends were considered in the Renaissance to be equals, to be absolutely identical. As Shakespeare's French contemporary, Michel de Montaigne, wrote of his friend, if a man urge me to tell wherefore I loved him, I feel it cannot be expressed but by answering, because it was he, because it was myself. So this idea that two male friends could love one another and see themselves in each other. There was a really deep intimacy between the best of male friends, and then Maston continues, it's hard when we see the word friend on the page in a Shakespeare play. Oh, hello, August.
Dinner's ready.
Hey, I'll be down in a little while as soon as I'm done, okay?
A little while, probably then dinner will already be almost finished.
Can you tell Dad I'll be done real soon? And can you shut the door behind you?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I'll see you in just a few minutes, okay? It smells delicious. Okay, sorry. It's hard when we see the word friend on the page in a Shakespeare play to recapture the intensity friendship held for people, especially men in Shakespeare's time. Okay, that's really helpful for me. And that's not even just true in the Renaissance. It was true in ancient Greece. Michel de Montaigne, Francis Bacon, Shakespeare, they were all drawing even from an ancient concept of male friendship as a soul in two bodies. Imagine that my soul is here, your soul is there, but our souls are so intimately connected that it feels like we have one soul in two bodies. Very interesting, strong homosocial dynamic between Hamlet and Horatio in this play, right? So as you're watching what's happening between Asta Nielsen as a cross-dressed Hamlet and Horatio, think about some of those gender dynamics, and ask yourself how they're functioning, how that changes your understanding of what's happening in Shakespeare's play. The other thing I'd like you to pay attention to is the ways in which, in Laurence Olivier's film, as much as I love it, I don't love how he has completely excised the Fortinbras plot. You don't see any reference to Fortinbras. You also don't see Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and the problem with that is that the play does not feel nearly as political as it could and should, I think. That's my personal feeling. You might disagree. Now, Olivier did that on purpose because he wanted to create a Hamlet that felt more solitary, felt more isolated, and he succeeded. Asta Nielsen, though, is very interested in using Fortinbras and also focusing on what a bad king Claudius is. So this is one of the title cards, and I just use this to signal to you, the bad government of King Claudius has created unrest in the people. That's a part of the Hamlet story that we must pay attention to in Asta Nielsen's Hamlet. There's some really nice shots where we get lots of people. Here's one example. These are the common people that are storming the palace when Laertes returns to Denmark, and they want some answers because Claudius has not been governing well. It's very, very interesting. So these are some things I'd like you to think about, and I have some other questions for you as well. Let me see. As I said, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are in this film. What ends up happening to them? What do you notice about their fate, if you will? What does Hamlet do with them? Think about that. Why does that happen? Which elements of Hamlet's backstory intrigue you the most? You're going to see Hamlet's birth. You're going to see Hamlet at Wittenberg. You're going to see Hamlet in all kinds of situations where we just don't see him in Shakespeare's play, and we certainly don't see him in Olivier's film. So how does that work on you as a viewer? What do you notice about Ophelia? Who loves Ophelia in Asta Nielsen's Hamlet? It's not Hamlet. Who is it? How does that create problems? Very interesting. And Gertrude, wow. So Crystal Valadez, in your Moodle response, you noticed that in Olivier's Hamlet, Gertrude seems completely ignorant of what was happening with Claudius and the murder of King Hamlet. I'd be very interested to see what you will think of this Gertrude in Asta Nielsen's Hamlet. It is very, very interesting. So I'm going to stop there. I just want you to have fun with silent film and enjoy just how spectacular it is. I think it's spectacular. I don't know. We'll see what you think. Maybe you won't like it. We'll see. So we've done a little bit of personal writing during this lesson. We've done some work with Laurence Olivier, a little brief introduction to Asta Nielsen, and now I'll leave it to you to watch the film and just see what you think of it. Just have some fun. I will know if you have watched this video because you will be sending me a photograph of the writing exercise that you did for 3 minutes at the beginning of this film. So thank you. Good luck with your work this week, and I'll see you next time. Okay, now I'm going to do this business. Let's see if I can go here. And I'll see you later. Bye.